What does Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail tell us about identity? There are a few central themes this expansion touches on, but the best message this story tries to tell is one about it truly means to be alive. What is the value of someone's soul, and what are the pieces that really make up a person's identity? I want to talk about all of those things, but first, a massive spoiler warning. Content through Dawntrail's main story quest in 7.0 will be discussed here. If you're not finished, save this video for another time. My name is Stout, and I hope you enjoy. The expansion before Dawntrail was Endwalker, and that story confronted us with some heavy philosophical questions as well. The central one being, what is the meaning of life? The themes of grief and life continue in Dawntrail, and most of that centers around the Endless. They feel, think, and act like a person, and believe they are among the living, even if they technically aren't alive. The most prominent Endless we encounter is Sphene, the Endless driven by the memories of the original Queen Sphene of Alexandria. Sir Otis Valona gives us insight on how the Endless came to be. 450 years ago is where the original Sir Otis had his soul transferred into the vessel he uses today. Sphene's parents, the original king and queen of Alexandria, died during a great war that threatened the reflection Alexandria is originally from. We don't know what that reflection is yet. Queen Sphene was adored, but her body suffered health problems due to overexposure to lightning ether. That's when the organization known as Preservation comes into play. It's composed of the brightest scientific minds in Alexandria. They wanted to find a way to keep Sphene as ruler even after her death. Their advancements with Electrope included the ability to extract someone's soul and prevent it from departing to the afterlife, which we know as the Ethereal Sea. The memories are also artificially extracted. The memories get uploaded to a form of cloud storage called the Living Memory. Sir Otis is perhaps the most interesting case when it comes to the Endless, but we'll circle back to him later. For now, let's continue with Queen Sphene. We learn a lot about her in a very short period of time. She acts suspiciously in the Warrior of Light's presence. She also avoids speaking candidly when automaton soldiers are nearby. The Queen's comments when out of earshot show she's concealing something from us, but that secret connects directly to her motivation. Sphene greatly cares for her people. That includes the people from the source who showed up when Alexandria and that stretch of Tyrol conjoined. The story takes a great deal of time, walking us through heartfelt interactions with a lot of people, and they all have genuine adoration for her. It's clear the Queen has touched countless lives because of her empathy, but despite that kind heart, we know she's experiencing a great deal of pain. She subtly reaches out to the Warrior of Light for their intervention. The protagonists eventually are at odds with the Queen. Sustaining the living memory requires immense amounts of ether. When her world began running out, she sought new sources elsewhere. A gateway to the source was built with the intention of killing its people and harvesting their souls. The events of 7.0 lead to the gates reopening. The Dawntrail main story quest paints Sphene as a tragic, sympathetic character. The Queen is forced to walk this path.
I do understand. All too well. Let me say only this then. Zaralja will use any means to win. If you would protect your people, return to them at once and prepare. Prepare as best you can. It may ring hollow coming from the queen of an enemy nation. But unlike me, you still have the power to determine your own fate.
This character arc is nothing new for Final Fantasy XIV's narrative. Characters like the Ascian Emet-Selch, the Voidsent, Golbez, and the Imperial Viceroy of Doma, Yotsuyu, all fit this theme. The difference with Sphene is the reason she's on this path. Remember, this isn't the historical Queen Sphene. The one we encounter is a copy of her memories bound by Preservation's programming. The scientists didn't keep her as she was during her creation. They programmed her with the desire to maintain her people's happiness, no matter the cost. She's loath to pursue genocide to keep the Endless in pure bliss. She goes so far as to remove the remaining pieces of the historical Sphne's personality from her memory, all so she can achieve the goal she was programmed to pursue.
Lamachi, I would have loved nothing more than to work hand in hand with you to tend our nations. But fate is cruel. By the time it had brought us together, our futures had already been written. The kind and gentle Queen Sphene was too weak to serve her people, and so she will serve them no more.
Warrior of Light's journey into Alexandria leads them to Kakiwa. She's Arenville's mother, and one of many caught in the conjoining of that section of Tyrol and Alexandria. Kakiwa resides in the living memory, but she is able to interact with the outside world by using an automaton. Kakiwa is the leader of Oblivion. It's a resistance group. The original mission was to prevent Alexandria from fusing with other worlds. Now they work to oppose Zoralja's rule. Kakiwa believes she knows how to stop Sphene, but she wants a favor in return. Shut down the living memory and set all of the Endless free. Preservation's schemes and Queen Sphene's actions put the Warrior of Light and Wuklamot in an uncomfortable position. Kakiwa assures us that the Endless are formed of memories and aren't actually people, just a facsimile formed from stolen life energy. But we mingle with the Endless inside the living memory, and even if they aren't alive by definition, we see humanity in them. The Endless have hopes, desires, deep personalities, and their own will. So if we shut them down, is that inhumane? Are we truly killing them if they aren't the genuine article? You could interpret this as the writers putting us in a position similar to the one that Emet-Selch was in Shadowbringers. I won't go into detail here, you can go watch my Emet-Selch video if you need a deep dive on him, but the Ascian believes sacrificing the lives of the living in the present is worth reviving the ancients who gave their lives to Zodiark thousands of years ago. The Ascian doesn't see what he's doing as genocide.
But that would be to ignore the immeasurable destruction wrought with each rejoining. You have murdered millions, and this we cannot condone.
By your fragmented existence, you continue to give rise to tragedies far crueler than any calamity. But yes, moral relativism and all that. Case in point, I do not consider you to be truly alive, ergo I will not be guilty of murder if I kill you.
We opposed Emet-Selch's ideals in favor of the new lives on Atheris. We won that fight, but we didn't break his resolve. Emet-Selch died believing his path was the right one. Now we're faced with a slightly similar dilemma. Setting the Endless free of the living memory so Sphene can't devour souls from other worlds. Final Fantasy XIV's narrative doesn't change from our dialogue choices, so the game puts us on this path of ending the Endless. But the philosophical questions of identity and consciousness aren't given definitive answers, so what conclusions can we draw from the story? There's a scene in Dawntrail where we see a civilian shot during the attack on Tuliula. An electro-powered soldier goes to the corpse and absorbs 2 orbs, one blue and one orange. Later quests indicate these orbs represent life ether and memory. When they're combined, you get a person's soul. Normally a soul goes to the ethereal sea for the cycle of rebirth, but Preservation broke that cycle. They bring souls to the Origenics facility to separate the living ether and memory. That memory is archived in the living memory, and the remaining soul is recycled, put in cells and consumed to power all aspects of Alexandrian life. Let's examine the concepts of identity and consciousness through the final Endless we'll discuss here, Sir Otis. First, we need to establish that there are 2 versions of Sir Otis in this story. The automaton vessel containing Sir Otis's soul is the first. The Endless made from his memories prior to obtaining that vessel is the second. They exist simultaneously. Let's talk about the Endless Sir Otis first. This Otis has none of his memories from his time in the automaton body. We encounter him in the Yesterland area of the living memory, which is essentially a theme park. The Endless Otis is a chivalrous knight through and through, but in the Yesterland, he's certainly out of place. Rarely are there foes to defeat here or royalty to protect. No, endless Otis is reduced to entertainment for the children, performing plays of the historical war between Alexandria and Lindblom. We know this Otis has no agency. Unpleasant memories were purged by the living memory. We see him come so close to remembering the death of the original Queen Sphene, but he can't reach them. That's because Sir Otis the Endless has no free will. He's forever bound by the programming of his memories. Otis remains a knight in a place that doesn't need them. Sir Otis the Automaton is a different story. Remember, this vessel contains Otis's original soul. The vessel has deteriorated over hundreds of years, but this Sir Otis still remembers the events of the war, what happened to the royal family, and everything he's experienced since. This Otis is also gallant and chivalrous, but there are key differences between him and his endless counterpart. Sir Otis has all of his memories, the good and the bad. He laments about how he failed to protect the royal family, and why he volunteered to be an experiment for the sake of the original Queen Sphene. He hides in the Alexandrian ruins because he's ashamed of what he's become. Otis doesn't want Sphene to see him as he is now. His experiences brought about change. This Sir Otis has a new purpose in nurturing and protecting the young Galulja. That's the abandoned son of Zoralja. And even after his vessel becomes controlled by Zoralja and stands against our heroes, Sir Otis is moved by Sphene's plea.
I remember you, Otis, so please remember yourself. You're a proud knight of Alexandria, a man who lives to serve the kingdom and its subjects. Otis!
Pray, stand back, Your Majesty. I am Sir Otis Bellona, Lord Captain of the Royal Knights of Alexandria. Upon mine honor, you shall harm neither my fair queen nor our citizens!
Sir Otis the Automaton embodies so much of the human experience. As people, we crave connection and purpose. He had that in Alexandria, its citizens, and the royal family. Tragic circumstances took that away, but Otis made a choice to take a chance on preserving its future. And despite decades of hardship, Sir Otis remained until he found a new purpose. He would protect and mold the boy who would become Alexandria's leader. The Lord Captain made his final stand defending Sphene, his new friends, and the people he swore to protect. Sir Otis is a great example of the human experience that Medion didn't understand until the closing chapter of Endwalker. And even if he's a literal ghost in the machine, he stands head and shoulders above the endless version of himself. I want to look at the issues of consciousness through the lens of philosophical study, which is definitely not my area of expertise, but I'm going to try and make some connections anyway. Feel free to correct any mistakes I make in the comments. David Chalmers is an Australian philosopher and cognitive scientist specializing in the areas of mind and language. He's best known for popularizing the idea of philosophical zombies. This term didn't originate from him, but he did talk about the concept extensively in a 1996 publication called The Conscious Mind. He defines a philosophical zombie as something physically identical to a normal human being but doesn't have the conscious experience. This theory is often used in support of what's called the hard problem of consciousness. This theory is meant to explain how and why humans and other organisms have subjective experiences in life. No one person will perceive and react to life circumstances in the same way. Now, not all philosophers subscribe to these two schools of thought. American philosopher and cognitive scientist Daniel Dennett argues philosophical zombies are logically incoherent. He believes consciousness is a complex series of functions and ideas. If we can have all of these experiences, the idea of a philosophical zombie is meaningless. Whatever you choose to believe, there are some connections you can make from the theory of philosophical zombies and the endless that Dawntrail introduces. There's another school of thought called mind-body dualism. This theory is that a person's mind and body are distinct and separable. The body is physical, while the mind is not. Final Fantasy XIV has its own version of mind-body dualism. A person's body may wither and die, but the soul inside that body will return to the ethereal sea and be born anew. There are so many references to this in the lore that it would take me forever to name them. But the game establishes very early on that we are much more than our physical bodies. One last bit of philosophy for you. In Buddhism, there is a doctrine called anatta. The belief is that in humans, there is no permanent underlying substance that can be called someone's soul. Instead, the individual is composed of 5 factors that are constantly changing. That cycle of growth from one life to another, in theory, leads to enlightenment. This is an interesting foil to the way the Endless operate. Like we saw with Sir Otis, there's no growth to be had there. He's forever a knight stuck in the same state as he was when he died. Lionsroar.com has an article that explains anatta much better than I ever could. The link is in the description. I also want to give a shout out to the Reddit user Agent Yoda for this fantastic post on an analysis of philosophy in Dawntrail. If the concepts I talked about in this video interest you, Agent Yoda goes into greater detail on a lot of these things that I'm not an expert on. So if you want to know more, you can read this fantastic post. The link is also in the description. We've covered quite a bit, so let's go back to the questions from the beginning. Are the Endless truly alive? Do they have consciousness and identity? Even if the game forces you down the path of shutting down the living memory, the answers to those questions are open to interpretation. But is what happens to the Endless considered genocide? No. The Endless spell this out for you, even if the journey to the shutdown is uncomfortable. The Endless know they are not the genuine article, and a few actually hope that their existence would end. Ultimately, we don't get much time with the dilemma of the living memory. The Dawntrail narrative spends much more time on the themes of family, death, and grief. And to be honest, everything surrounding the living memory is much more interesting to me. Hopefully we'll get more in future story patches, but for now, I'd really like to know what you think about the ethical dilemma of the Endless. Talk to me in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video and want more discussion on Final Fantasy XIV's story, subscribe so you know when new videos come out. And if you want to stay in touch with me, you can track me down on my socials. Take care, warriors, and I'll see you next time.